We're joined today by a special guest, Grace Lantz, who's a financial coach, and I brought her on to talk about money mindset. Today's day 5 of our Money Mindset Challenge, the boot camp that we're completing just now. I thought it would be a nice little bonus for us to hear from someone who does this professionally and learn more about the money mindset pitfalls that people have and what kind of habits that we can build in order to better steward the resources that we are entrusted with. Grace, thank you for coming today. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day. I know you're a busy mom, and I appreciate you being here. Why don't you just tell people a little bit who you are and what you do, and then we'll get started.
Yeah. So, like you said, I am a busy mom of 4 boys. They're ages 2 to 10, so they definitely keep me on my toes, and I homeschool them. I'm in the homeschool room right now, so they keep me very busy. But I am a financial coach, and I've been doing that for about 5 years now almost, and just really enjoy getting to speak with individuals and couples and help them on the day to day side of their finances. Unfortunately, there's a lot of financial advisors. Well, not unfortunately that there's financial advisors, but unfortunately, that's about the only financial professionals most of us know to search out when we are looking for or getting out of debt or working on your mindset and deciding what your family values on the day to day side of the finances. So that's what I get to do as a financial coach. And I absolutely love it. I especially love working with couples. My favorite is probably working with young, like just married or engaged, that kind of range of couples, because so many people wait till they are getting close to retirement age to start thinking about their finances.
Yeah, it was interesting because we have a bunch of guys now in the Good King group, and the men in the Good King are focused on becoming the kind of leaders that God made them to be and more fully embodying the ethos of Jesus in their life. And to look to Jesus as an example in every part of their life and to make decisions and to lead as if Jesus was in their shoes. And because, the thing I like to say is lead as if Jesus was in your shoes, because he is. He's in your life, he's in your heart, you're united to him, and live as if that were true, because it is. And so making decisions in our money, with our money and around our finances, is a huge part of stepping into that embodiment of the fullness of our masculinity and taking responsibility and radical ownership for every part of our life, is what we all want to do. And there was this realization that I had that not only, so I, as a coach, I've learned as I've become a coach, I've become aware that God will bring the opportunities for my own growth into my life through my clients. The needs that my clients have and the things that I hear myself needing to say to them to help them are the things that I need to learn. And I try to be clear with the guys when I'm speaking from a place of authority and expertise, and when I'm speaking from a place of the player coach who's learning alongside with you. And in the area of finances, I'm very much learning alongside with the guys. And, I tell guys, look, I can't tell you how to become a millionaire because I'm not one. I'll walk with you on that journey to becoming one, but I can't speak from a place of authority on that. Now, if you want to learn how to create a wonderful environment in your home and have a transcendent marriage and a beautiful relationship with your kids and to walk in freedom from addiction, I can teach you how to do that from a place of authority and experience. But when it comes to money and becoming someone who stewards money well, I'm an initiate, I'm an apprentice in the same way that the guys are. And so that's where I'm coming from as I lead this boot camp. I did this boot camp with the guys. I did the work as well. So it's been insightful for me to do that. And as I think about, you mentioned the financial advisors, it seems like there's really 3 parts to this money equation in terms of things that we need to look for and get right and get in place in order to start moving forward. Maybe 4 as I think about it. You mentioned the financial advisor, and that's probably the first thing that comes to mind when people think about getting help with money. But then there's also the role of the coach, someone who can help with the day-to-day, the kind of budgeting and practical questions about what are you doing with your money. And
Yeah, and financial where I get most of my clients because people only know to call a financial advisor and then they go, well, we can't help you with this. We're ready when you have enough
yes,
savings and investing to send our way, but
yeah,
we are not going to be able to get you there.
can't
So
really help you
they
get there.
usually send them on to me then.
So there's the coach, there's the financial advisor, and then there's really the mindset piece, like the
Mhm.
stories, the underlying story of like where does money fit into your overall journey in life, and where are you as a leader in terms of leading yourself towards the life that you were called to live, and stepping into the fullness of that. And so that's where I think I come into play with guys is I'm helping them develop the kind of life and the kind of faith that leads them to want to face these fears and bring these things into alignment with love. So let's talk a little bit about the practical part of what you do. You mentioned that you love working with young couples who are just getting started in marriage. Tell me who, like, is that your ideal client? Who is your ideal client, and what, like, as in as much detail as you are able to or willing to, what do you do with them? What do you help them do? How do you, who's the ideal client, and what do you start with when they come to you?
Yeah, so definitely young couples are my ideal client. I have been surprised since starting my business how many older couples I've been working with. Um, but my ideal client is helping them before they get into a mess. So helping them start on the same page where there can be unity in finances. That is a huge thing that I want to teach and encourage people is for couples to have unity in their finances, in the way that they look at their finances, not just on like the day-to-day decisions, but on like what do we want out of life and how does that affect our finances. And so yeah, when I'm starting with a young couple, um, I often like to meet, if possible, once or twice while they're engaged, and then the first couple months of their marriage. And we start with that I know you mentioned that you talked about this week. What did your parents do with their finances? Did they talk about money? Um, Not just did your parents have money, but was it a stressful topic? Was it one of those topics where we don't ask mom and dad about money? We're not allowed to talk about it because surprisingly, there's tension in all levels of income, right? It's not just if we don't have a lot of money that money is stressful. Sometimes people with a lot of money still have a lot of money stress and a lot of money hurt. So that's kind of where we start because when two people are getting married and they have these two different philosophies on money that they sure those things carry on and how do we maybe not do the things that we didn't like that our parents did. And then we talk about what has God called you as a couple to do that is unique because I think there's so many things we could do with our money, right? Even when we talk about giving, like there's a million, probably literally a million nonprofit organizations we could donate our money to, and we can't spread it out between all of them.
Mhm.
So, what has God called you uniquely to as a couple based on your gifts and your passions? And then we say, okay, how does that affect your day to day finances? So, a good example of that would be some couples are just really hospitable. And so their grocery budget is going to be way high. And they're going to maybe even want a bigger home because of other people coming into their house a lot, or they're
Mhm.
going to want nicer furniture or whatever it is that is going to be reflected in their finances because they're hospitable. But then another couple is going to say, we really care about international missions. And so we want to be every summer in another country taking our kids to experience these different cultures and we want to be supporting missionaries and so maybe we're going to have a smaller house and a smaller grocery budget because we want to fund those goals. So I love being able to start there instead of just saying, well, this is what a family of four should spend on groceries.
Right. Love that. One of the things, pardon me, one of the things that came up in our conversations in the community about money mindset is just thinking about the question of like, how did your parents deal with money? It was almost universal, maybe not quite, but thank you, Bridget. Almost universal that Bridget brought me a nice cup of
Nice.
cappuccino. that guys would say some version of this, which is, we never talked about money in my home. And like you said, it was across the income range. It doesn't matter if there was, little or a lot or medium. It was just something we didn't talk about. And so, there's something interesting going on there from a generational perspective, that baby boomers didn't teach their children how to think about money, and their children didn't teach their children how to think about money, to a large degree. And I wonder, like, what percentage of your clients, and I'm assuming there's a little bit of bias in the people that you talk to, because the fact that they sought you out tells me that they are thinking about money and they're being intentional about it. So that you probably are biased in who you talk to. But I'm curious, is that a common response? How common is that?
Yeah, so being in Lancaster County, I get a lot of my parents told me to work hard and save money. And that was the
Hmm.
extent of my financial education. And so even to the extent of like, okay, they told us to save money. They didn't even tell us what we're saving it for or where to put the money we're saving, but they told me to save money and they told me to work hard. And so that's about 50% of my clients, I think, would say that's what they were taught. And um, there are a few that say, well, I'm trying to think if anybody's actually said, like, I've learned these really good lessons from my parents. Not very many, but again, that could be biased because maybe they're not in a good mindset and that's why they're coming to see me. Um, but there are a few who say, I've heard of this Dave Ramsey guy at my church. And so I know that budgeting is this thing I'm supposed to do because I've heard it that way. Um, but a lot of times it, I think it comes from shame. I've heard a lot of people like my dad didn't talk about money because he knew he wasn't good at it. And so he was just ashamed to let us know where the family finances were. And so um, definitely that's been a big part of it.
Yeah. So the idea that couples talk to each other about, you mentioned the question you ask is, what do you want with your money? What do you want to do with your money? We were talking in the group about why is that such a difficult conversation for us to have? Like, why don't we let our spouse know what we want? Not just about money, about anything. And one of the things, and it could be something like, I don't feel worthy to get what I want, ask for what I want, communicate what I want. And I think there's also a dynamic there where it's like, if I communicate what I want, then my spouse has the power to keep me from getting what I want, or I'm afraid I won't get what I want if I put that out there, and communicate that, because you're giving somebody a certain kind of power over you when you share your deepest desires with them. And my wife and I found that that's the communication about your deepest desires and your deepest fears is one of the pathways to intimacy, to real intimacy in a couple, in a marriage. And I wonder how you've seen that dynamic unfold when people start talking about what they want. Does that feel like a vulnerable place for people?
Yeah, I think sometimes though it's so suppressed that it takes a lot for me to get out what they want. And I from what I've seen, it's not always a fear of telling the other person. It's just I've suppressed what I want for so long that I don't even feel like I'm allowed to think about it. So,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be like, okay, so what do you enjoy spending your money on? Well, like, I don't know. I don't enjoy any of the money I spend. Well, that's no fun. That's not, a lot of people think, oh, you're a finance coach. You're just here to tell people don't spend on this, this, and that. And no, I want you to spend on the things you care about. So stop spending on the things that you don't care about. Um, and so, yeah, I think when people are try to think about what they want from their money, they just honestly haven't thought about it from my experience. Maybe they're not just
So,
being honest with me, but
yes. And one of the ways that talking about spending money on what you want makes me think about all of the things that we do to pursue, something like the regulation of our nervous system, or to bring our nervous system into a state where we're not miserable, or we're not suffering, we're not feeling anxious. And so we go buy something, or we go consume something, or we go, to include media, scrolling on your phone, or, the consumption of food, drugs, the engagement in sex. There's all kinds of different things that we do to soothe our nervous system and to bring us into a more regulated state. And one of the ways that I've thought about that is like we're reaching out to get, to grasp the fruit that we believe will heal us, will make us feel like we're healed, even if it's just temporary. It's that fruit that Eve reached out to grasp and to make her like God. And certainly the way we spend our money and the things that we buy, there's a huge overlap between that and the things that we do to soothe our nervous system. There's people, sometimes we have a compulsive shopping addiction, like explicitly buying things to soothe our nervous system, or even the act of the pursuit of something is like a dopaminergic loop. The shopping for something, the looking for something, and then maybe the actual going and buying it. And my aim is to help us my belief is that our true nervous system regulation is only found in Jesus, that our deepest regulation of our nervous system is found in union with God. And do you find when you get into some of these conversations, have you ever noticed people's body language and their kind of state of anxiety and their kind of withdrawal? Or what do you see in couples when you start engaging in these conversations?
Yeah, definitely anxiety, a lot of what ifs. Um, Often the females are, well, like, we're in this situation. Actually, I had one client who I truly believe, and she even mentioned it, that her health was just completely declining because of their financial situation, the stress and the anxiety. And that was not because she had stopped choosing it. That in that case, it was because her husband was just at a loss, didn't know what to do, felt completely ill equipped, and so kind of had thrown his hands up. Um, but there definitely is a lot of anxiety when people are talking about, well, if I make this change that you're suggesting, then you're taking this like crutch away from me. Um,
Yep.
and so that's why we have to start with, what do you want the end goal to be and what do you want your values of your budget to show? Because it's like, okay, but this spending over here, I know you don't actually care about this more than what you told me you want to start doing with your money. So you have to decide. Um, None of us can do, again, everything with our money. So,
Yeah. One of the questions that I think about in terms of money is because we talk a lot about in the group the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine. And I'm just going to guess that a majority of the people that you work with in your community, the male, the masculine, and he may not be in his masculine energy, but the man is the one who probably earns more income,
yep.
primary breadwinner. What's the dynamic, just at a kind of overall level, without going into specifics necessarily, but what are the dynamics that you see play out between husbands and wives?
I don't think I've ever had a couple where, I think I've had one where the female earns more, even if she's working, like they're not the maybe primary breadwinner. Um, and so I think sometimes that causes, um, not feeling heard or valued, or I don't get to say anything because it's not my money. Um, and sometimes it's nothing that the man has said to make them feel that way. Maybe their actions have, but they're not saying that outright. Um,
Right.
but women, talking about the different, it is interesting seeing the difference between women and men's desires with their money. And I think the biggest place that comes out is in security. So women want a bigger savings account, are less risk taking because they want the security of an emergency fund. Um, and they sometimes don't know how to communicate that. And so they get frustrated. Um, but it's the nurturing side of us as women. We want to know that our babies are taken care of and going to be okay if our husband's out of work for a week. And so that has been interesting seeing the dynamics there. And it doesn't really matter how much the woman makes or not. That is typically something that the woman cares about more, where the man comes in and is like, okay, how do I invest and, make retirement happen, and like has these big picture goals. Um, but then I love just pointing out, we need both of those. And if one person is completely making all the financial decisions from that perspective, there's going to be something missing. And so, again, that's why I like working on financial unity. So we need both of those perspectives. God gave us both of them to run a household.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just focus on security and never take risks. And sometimes the man might need to be reminded, hey, it's okay if we have a little bit in savings and we don't put everything in crypto.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So what are the most damaging patterns or mindsets or beliefs that you see men come into these conversations with?
Feeling like they'll never be enough. And again, it doesn't matter income, just the lack of, I don't know how to do this. So, and I'm not doing good at it, because usually 80% of my clients are coming to me because they don't feel like their finances are in a good spot. So the men are often saying, I don't know how to make this better, so I'm just going to give up.
Mm-hmm. And giving up is just avoidance, not thinking
Right.
about it,
Yes.
just sweeping it under the rug.
I'm not going
Yeah.
to check our bank accounts. I'm either going to let you do all of it, or I'm going to keep managing it, but I'm going to just do the bare minimum. Like, I guess make sure the bills get paid, but obviously sometimes that doesn't even happen. Yeah.
What are some of the conversely, what are some of the most damaging mindsets, behaviors, attitudes, patterns that women bring into the relationship that you
Yeah.
see?
Well, women do a little bit more of the small spending, like the over like the shopping compulsion, or um buying this $20 thing on Amazon. It's not going to affect our finances. So I can just keep making $20 Amazon purchases, and then your Amazon bill for the month is $1,000. And then, I mean, I've had women say, I don't spend on anything. And then they spent $1,000 on Amazon. And I say, well, what did you buy on Amazon? Oh, I don't know. Like, they literally don't. I think they don't know. They just make a bunch of little
It
purchases
doesn't register.
that just, like you said, feel good in the moment. Um, and a lot of times I'm guilty of this as well. As moms, it's easy to justify it if it's for somebody else. Like, it's for the kids. We're buying all these little trinkets for the kids or things for the house, and it's not for us. So it doesn't feel like we're spending.
Right.
And so they justify it then by saying, well, the kids needed it. Well, did they? They probably
Yeah.
could care less.
So back to the decisions that the husbands are making. So they're abdicating a lot of the management of the finances to their wives. What are the purchasing decisions that you see husbands make that really get their family in trouble?
Vehicles. That's a big one. Like, that's why I said the men, it's more like the big things. They might not spend. This is obviously generalizing things, but
Sure.
the
And
men are
I'm
less
asking you to
likely,
generalize.
yeah, to spend $1,000 over the course of the month on Amazon. They may not spend very much on themselves for weeks at a time, months at a time, but then they buy the toys, the
Yeah. The
things.
guns and the,
Yeah, the guns and the things with motors and the RVs
yeah,
or whatever it is.
crypto, horses.
Crypto.
Yeah, all of
Yeah.
it. Um, One of the things we talk about in The Good King is being apprenticed to Jesus by, and being disciplined to be apprenticed to Jesus by bringing all of the patterns in our life into coherence with a life of love, a life that's led by love and truth. And so the way I think about that is, it's a steady step by step process of bringing my life into harmony with Jesus. So thinking specifically about the patterns of behavior, mindset in your finances, what are the things that you really look for and try to help? What are the patterns that you help try to implement? I'm talking about, like, practically speaking, in terms of budgeting, in terms of the husband and wife communicating about it. Is it something that they need to be talking about every week, every month, every day? Is it something that, is there a pattern that you see is helpful in terms of who's paying the bills? Does that vary? Just talk to me about some of
Yeah.
the best practices that you try to help people
Yeah. So
embody.
the biggest thing is monthly finance meetings. Um, Sometimes we're in situations where it needs to happen on a weekly basis, but everybody needs to have at least a monthly budget meeting. And I sometimes joke that we're planning the money fights for just one day a month for couples that are fighting about money over and over. But it just gives that specific time to bring up, like you said, the desires. Like, this is what I would like. Can we fit it in the budget? And it becomes a freeing time to say, okay, this is our one time we're going to set aside, no distractions, probably not have any kids around when we're doing this, and talk about what happened last month. That's the part most people don't do. They might talk about the coming month, but they don't talk about what happened last month and what do we need to improve on or what did we do well. And then just talk about the month to come. So, I'm a big fan of budgeting. I know not everybody does a super detailed monthly budget, but it doesn't matter how you're managing your day to day finances. You need to at least be sitting down to talk about these things once a month. And for couples who are hesitant to do that, I say start with like dream meetings, talking about like what are our dreams for 5 years from now, because that usually causes less disagreements. Um, hopefully you have some common goals for 5 or 10 years from now. And if not, that's probably a marriage counseling conversation or, not a
Right.
finance issue. And so, but yes, definitely the monthly meetings are huge. And then a yearly, uh, my husband and I did this for the first time this year where we actually got away to do a yearly audit of finances, schedule, all the things. Went away for the night, then spent the whole morning at a coffee shop talking about what we wanted to do. And one thing that came up there was he wanted to do some gun course that he thought maybe we couldn't, probably that might be selfish to try to fit that into the budget. We looked it up, it was like $500. We're like, great, go do it this year. Like, we'll plan on getting it done this year. And so just setting that time aside to have those conversations when you're not in stress, when the kids aren't around, when you're not in the regular busyness of the day, um, makes a huge difference.
I love that. Yeah, that's something that I have not led well, and I want to do more of that. Um, my wife has specifically asked me for that. So, what do you say to guys like me who, when you say the word monthly finance meeting, it's like, many of us would rather schedule a monthly root canal. And so,
Yeah.
how do you help shift people into, seeing that as
Hmm.
not only something that needs to be done, but that they actually can be empowered to lead?
Yeah. Well, like I said, starting with just the big picture dreaming, because that's fun. Like, and then you have to realize that in order to make those big dreams happen, this might be a necessary evil. And you asked earlier, and I didn't answer that specific part of the question, what who's better at paying the bills, that type of thing is, in my opinion, if we're having unifying meetings, and we're talking about finances on a weekly basis, if it doesn't matter who's actually writing out the bills. And so for the men who are like, finances is not my thing, uh, it's okay if the woman does the entering into the budget, but we have to be on the same page, and you can still lead by saying, okay, we're going to set aside the first Monday. And if that means you're going to say, I get to go to my favorite restaurant and order a bourbon while we do this, like, that's fine. Make it something enjoyable. Or we need to go get a hotel for the night and then the next morning work on the budget. Um, Whatever that is to make it more enjoyable. Um, I think once you start doing it, it's hard to stop because you realize the benefit of
Yeah,
it. So sometimes it's
I
just
love it.
pulling up your bootstraps and doing it for a couple months. I always
Yeah,
tell people if they're going to start budgeting or working on their finances, don't start unless you're going to give it 3 months.
yeah,
Like don't
yeah. That's a
don't
good. That's
don't I'm
great.
going to make a budget this month. Like that's pointless. It's going to stink the first
Yeah,
month. Um
right. Let's talk about budgeting specifically because I hate budgeting. I have had a complicated relationship with budgeting, and I've only relatively recently started leading all of the budgeting for our family and tracking every penny, and even starting to shift into telling our pennies where to go, and being more intentional about that. Um, do you feel strongly that basically every couple needs to budget?
I do.
And when I
I
say that, I
definitely,
mean at a pretty granular level.
yeah. So I don't count cents like people think that just because I love budgeting that I'm counting every penny. I I'm not that anal, but I do think you that having some kind of budget, and it doesn't have to look exactly the same for every couple, is essential. If you don't know where your money is going, you can't make adjustments. You can't say, I'm going to take the $500 gun course that I want to take because I don't know where that money is going to come from. And so, unless you're a multimillionaire with the average person's desire and you don't desire to spend your billions, I don't know how else to manage money well. Now, some people can have a more detailed budget than others. For some people, having a really broad categories, like just a category called fun that includes everything basically non-essential. If that means you actually do a budget by having broader categories and not having to track things so religiously, um, if that works for you, that works for me.
Yeah, good. What are some of the tools that you recommend that people use for budgeting? What's your favorite budgeting system? And then what else have you seen that works for people?
Yeah. So I usually recommend to most of my clients, if they don't have any system in place, to use the Every Dollar app because the free version is still really good. And because I am very frugal, I like that it's free. That's Dave Ramsey's app. And I don't follow all of Dave Ramsey's stuff to a T. I own a credit card. But I do think the app works very well. The Monarch Money app, I am starting to look into and use, and I think that that's a pretty good one as well, but that does have a monthly fee. Every Dollar also has a paid version, which is only $80 a year and is worth it if you don't enjoy budgeting because it then ties to your bank account and does some of the work a little bit more automatically for you. So, it's worth the $80 if that's what's going to get you to budget. But that's usually where I start. But I have people that do pen and paper. I have people that use Excel sheets. Um, if people are looking for resources, I love the Seed Time Money podcast. That couple, they have an free Excel download, and budgeting their way of budgeting just using an Excel sheet works really well too. Um, So it can work anyway. I mean, I don't think anybody's using cash envelopes anymore because it's just not possible to use cash for everything anymore. But otherwise, I mean, I have had Amish clients who are just doing everything on pen and paper, and that works too. But I do like the apps because you can have it on both spouses' phones. So I'm the nerd in the relationship. There's usually a nerd in each marriage. So I enjoy these things more. But if I had it on just my computer, then unless we're doing a budgeting meeting, my husband wouldn't be looking at it. So I like that the app can be on both phones. Always have it
Hmm.
with you.
And when you're budgeting at that level, we've been using YNAB for a couple of
Oh,
years.
yep, that's a
You
great
need a
one too.
budget,
Yep.
so we like that. It's got basically everything, and it is a little more expensive. I think it's $16 a month, or there's a discount if you pay annually. But it's helped me. It's been the only tool that I've found that's kind of helped me get over the hump of budgeting and actually doing it. Does it become second nature at some point to
Yes.
really look at the budget in terms of, let's say, oh, I want to stop and get a coffee. You know, are you pulling up your app and like, how much do we have in, the coffee fund or
No.
the dining out fund or whatever?
No.
Or do you just kind of have how do
Yeah,
you
so for
approach that?
me, I kind of have the categories that I know there's usually only like 3 categories that you have to actually watch. And that might be different between you and I, what we're spending our money on. But, groceries is always something that people tend to go over on, and they don't want to because they don't want to spend all their money on groceries. So that's something you might be updating and looking at more often. But then, like, my husband and I each have our own line item that's our like fun money that we can do whatever we want with. That's where my latte would come out of in the drive-through, and so I don't have to pull up the app. I just know how much I have that month. Might be easy
Yeah.
for me because I don't
Yeah.
spend a ton, but yeah, I'm not checking those things. And a lot of people think, well, I have to throw out a budget because I went over in a category. I bought the latte and I thought I had the money in the entertainment category and I didn't. Well, see, I can't make budgeting work. Okay, going $6 over. I mean, that happens literally every single month to me. Almost every month, where a category is a couple dollars over. I'm not stressing about that. The
Hmm.
point of the budget is to have a plan for our money. If you have a plan to drive to your destination and you have to take one, wrong turn, you don't just give up going to the place because
Right.
one road is
Right.
closed. You don't give up on going to the party. You just reroute and figure out how to make it work, and you adjust the plan as
Yeah.
needed. But if you're not
So
tracking,
if somebody's in a rough place, let's say they've got credit card debt, maybe some medical debt or school debt, car debt, and they're just kind of floating along, bobbing along the surface of the water, nose just barely above the waterline, where do you start?
yeah, that's a good question because I did just say it's okay for me to go over $5 in a category. And if you're in one of those situations, maybe it's not for a time period. But starting with realizing you maybe just need to sacrifice for a short period of time, and then you can get to the point where it's okay if you go over a couple of dollars. Um, the starting point really is the budget though in a situation like that because again, a lot of people say we don't spend money. I don't know where it's all going. We're in all this credit card debt, but I really just don't think we spend. I don't think there's anything we can cut back. I don't think it's possible to get through this. And they feel hopeless. And I think knowing where everything is going can start to give you the correct perspective where you feel less hopeless. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
just just starting to track where your money is going is the best place to start. And then, of course, I walk
So
through the debt snowball and stuff with people, but you can't do that if you're not tracking anything.
pay off the credit cards, smallest to largest.
Yep.
Talk to me about emergency funds. Do you kind of track with Dave Ramsey on that? Start with a
Yeah. So
thousand
I do
dollars
like,
and then
so Dave Ramsey would say start with $1,000, then pay off all your debt other than a mortgage, and then build up 3 to 6 months of emergency fund. I'm a little bit more flexible. I think I like the 3 to 6 months is the goal. And I actually have had people where they forgot more than 6 months and they need to stop saving. They need to be told to stop saving. Um, but I think $1,000 is, I think that's one of his biggest like points that he gets critiqued on. I think $1,000 is pretty small. And so I often say starting with 1 month of expenses is a good place to start. Or I love the Money Guy podcast. Their rule is at least be able to cover all of your deductibles. So your car deductible, your house, your medical, um, having enough for that, because sometimes that is more than
Mm-hmm.
1,000. Now, if people have zero money in savings, I often do just say, let's start with $1,000, because saying a whole month's expenses can be daunting if you have $0. And so then I do say, hey, let's make the first goal $1,000 before we start tackling
Good.
any debt. So it kind of depends where they
That's
are, which is what I like getting to do, is like customizing plans for people.
right. Good. Let's talk about generosity and about investing.
Yeah.
How do you
Which one do you
teach
want me to
people to
start
think about that?
with?
Whatever you like.
Okay, generosity. Well, if you want to be inspired to give, I would point to that same podcast I mentioned earlier, the Seed Time podcast, or their book, Simple Money, Rich Life, by Bob and Linda Loddick. Um, so that's a good place to start. But as far as just in general, generosity, I think no matter where you are in your finances, generosity is important, because it gives us a totally different perspective on our money. If we are just trying to grasp all the money for ourselves and what can this do for me and my family, then we don't have a Jesus-like perspective of our finances. And so if you're in a lot of debt, or you're a millionaire, or anywhere in between, I recommend the top line of your budget is giving. Now, I'm not going to tell anybody how much that should be, what percentage or what amount, or do we need to tithe pre-tax or post-tax, or all those things I don't get caught up in the weeds on. But one thing I do like talking about is, what is an easy yes for us with giving, and what are easy no's? Because like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things we could give to. And I think that God gives us all a passion for something. So since I was in middle school, I've been a passionate pro-lifer. And so I give to organizations that are helping pregnant teenagers and things like that. Those are easy yeses for me when somebody wants money for something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm able to say no without guilt when people ask me for money for other things, because I know that I'm giving to the things that I'm passionate about. Um,
That's great. Great
so
advice.
yeah, having like even those written down somewhere as a couple. I actually have a form that I hand out to my clients for our giving plan. Like what do we care about and what don't we care about? Um, what what are we going to give to? And just making an actual plan for that, and then setting aside money for it, because it's really fun when you have like $500 that you have to give away, and you get to look for places to give it away. There's
Mm-hmm.
not any more fun with money that you can have. If money doesn't buy happiness, if you think that it doesn't buy any happiness, you haven't given enough away. I love that quote, because
That's great.
it's true. If you have the money set aside that you have to give away, because that's what your budget says, um, yeah, it's just really rewarding.
Yeah. So what about investments? How do you teach people to think and act about their investments?
Yeah, so I would say investments are definitely an area where not, I am the, what did you call it? The player coach.
Mm-hmm.
I am not in the weeds about investments, but I think everybody can start investing without um, knowing everything that a financial advisor knows. And I think a lot of people get caught up thinking they have to have thousands to start investing, or they have to have like infinite knowledge about how the stock market works. And you don't. You can start with $50 a month, automatically transferring into an investment account, like a Roth IRA. And I think it's sad that so many people don't realize that, and it's just because they weren't educated about it and don't even know what to Google to get started, you know.
Right.
And so, um, but I think it is biblical to invest. You know, I've had some people be like, "Well, I don't know, shouldn't we just trust the Lord for our future?" And Proverbs says that the righteous man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And I don't, of
Mm-hmm.
course, yes, we can leave a godly inheritance of Christ-like character and leave that legacy, but I do think that is also including wealth. That's what the point of that verse was. And so um, it is amazing how your money can grow if you have time in the market. And, you know, I'm not an investing I'm not an investing expert. I know more than the average person, but I'm not an expert, and I still was able to get a 15% return on my money last year just by putting my money in the American stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think the biggest thing is automating, just having an automatic transfer every month so you don't have to remember to do it. For
Yep.
people who obviously have that just can come out of their paycheck, that's great. But people who don't have the option of a 401k or something at work, just setting up automated transfers is the best way to do it. Warren Buffett is really
Love
wealthy
it.
because he's had a lot of years in the market. He started investing when he was 10 and he's rather old now. And so part of the reason he has so much money is literally just from investing in the stock market well and steadily and faithfully, and not jumping on the next get rich quick trend, but actually just being faithful with his money. And so,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
What have I missed? What did I not ask that
Mm,
guys should know about in terms of money?
I think you covered a lot of it. Um, yeah, I think just having a plan is so valuable, and whether that's starting with just making a plan to pay off your debt or it's investing, just having conversations. And if, like, for single guys, having conversations with somebody, whether it's when they're in the group with you or whatever it is, I think money has become a taboo topic, or always has been maybe a taboo topic. And it's kind of ridiculous because it's just paper and coins. I don't think money is the most important thing in life. That's not why I'm a financial coach, but I think God uses money to teach us lots of lessons because he knows that money is just a necessary part of our lives.
Yeah, and I'm just learning about how deeply connected money is to our heart and what a reflection, my calendar and my bank statement
Yep.
are one of the best ways to tell what I value. And
Yes.
that's just the brutal reality of it.
Yeah.
And we
And
have to face that.
if you look at your bank statement and you say that's not the things I value, then it's up to you to change that.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, let's wrap up by just share specifically how you help people and what your approach, like how do you work with people? Do you have packages that couples hire you for a certain amount of coaching sessions, or how does that work? Like as specifically as you'd like to detail it out?
Yeah. So I meet with probably about half my clients in person and half of them on video calls, and have, in several different states. And I meet with people for 1 hour once a month. And then there's email accountability in between. So you're getting a weekly email from me saying, hey, we talked about this. How's it going? What progress are you making? Or did you remember to check on this? And also, then my clients can email me at any time with questions, whether it's, hey, our insurance is up for renewal. Should we shop around for this, or does this sound like a good rate? And so I meet with people. My packages start at 3 or 6 months. So we're meeting, again, it takes at least 3 months to kind of get used to budgeting. My goal is not to meet with people forever. My goal is to set people up and educate them so that they can manage their money well.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, my website is familyfinancialcoaching.org, and all of my packages are on there. I offer free, introduction consultation calls. And yeah, I love working with couples who want their finances to reflect their values and aren't quite sure that that is happening right now and want to get there. Whether that's because you're in a lot of debt or because you feel like you're in a good situation, but you're just kind of coasting by, um,
Hmm.
and not having a plan for it.
Good. Well, thank you very much for agreeing to spend this time with us. It's valuable to us, and I appreciate your
Absolutely.
input tremendously. It's been really good to talk to you, Grace. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on here
Yeah.
and
And
sharing
if
your
anybody has any questions
wisdom.
or want other resources, even if it's not meeting with me, Like I said, money is one of those topics people don't love talking about, and I actually really love talking about it. And so um, I'm always, happy to answer emails or things like that if you just have like a
Good.
one-off question.
Thank you. And what's your website again?
Familyfinancialcoaching.org and
Okay.
familyfinancialcoaching@gmail.com is my email.
Thank you, Grace. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for
I
having
hope you have a
me.
good weekend.
You as well.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.